Hello there and welcome to a new lesson. In this one, we will create the background for our room game. So basically here GameMaker does provide a quite handy way of creating this background because it already creates a background layer that, as we have been discussing in the menu room, well, basically here you can set any color. However, in this case, what we want to set instead of a color is a sprite. Okay, we want to show the background sprite that we saw in the assets lesson, and not only do we want to show it, but also like to move it to the left so that we give the player the feeling of movement. Okay, this is going to make much more sense once we actually set up this background. So as you can see, it requires us to provide a sprite as we want to have as a background. So indeed, let's go here to the sprites folder, right click, create, and then here sprite. I'm going to be calling it SPR background. And right here, I'm going to click import, and basically here I will go to my assets folder and I will load in the background. Okay, so here I have it. Now after doing this, I'm going to come back to my game room, and inside of the background layer I will select here the sprite that I have just created. Okay, and well, here actually we have some properties that we can modify, because right now if we play, okay, and we go to this room, once we click here the play button, well, it looks a little bit weird. Okay, so we have to fix this. First of all, as you can see, the background it's not covering like all the screen. So in order to avoid that, we have to enable here stretch. Okay, so it will basically a stretch to fill all the background space. Quite easy. Now, when we play again, we can check that, well, we do have a much better result. But as I told you, I want to be scrolling my background like this, okay, as if we were moving. And here, what is pretty good about GameMaker is the fact that here it provides a speed value that you can modify. So as I explained, we want to move to the left, okay? I want to scroll to this direction. So I want to move horizontally to the left, and that will be my x-axis. And for example, the speed that I will provide is something like -5. Okay. Now, when I play again, you can see that indeed it is scrolling, but well, then this happens. Okay. Basically, our background is not being repeated. So basically, we have to enable here horizontal tile. So basically, our background is going to be infinitely repeated in the horizontal axis. And as you can see, it is impossible to realize that we are actually only using one background that is moving and tiling horizontally. Okay, so as you can see, the effect is quite cool and actually gives the feeling of movement. That is what we are looking for. And basically, with this, we do have our background set correctly. Hello there and welcome to a new lesson. In this one, we will start creating our player. Our player will basically have tons of functions, events, variables, etc. So it's actually an object that we are going to be modifying in a variety of lessons. Okay, so right now, in what we are going to be focusing in is basically creating the jump. Okay. So as I have already explained, the process of creating a new object that is going to appear in the screen and that then is going to have some code is quite similar in all cases. Basically, you firstly create a sprite and then you create an object containing that sprite. And finally, inside of the object, you add all the events and lines of code that you need in order to make that object do what you want. So let's create here a brand new sprite that I will call SPR player, and I will import my player asset. Okay, I don't know what happened there. Yeah, here we have it. So there we have the sprite player, and then I'm going to create the object player. So let's here create, and here object obj player. Then inside of this object player, let's load in the sprite. You can even drag and drop it right here if you want. It's going to work in the exact same way. And now we can add the corresponding events in order to actually make our player jump. So basically I want to jump when I release the left button of my mouse. And as I explained actually in a previous lesson, you have different events that seem quite similar but are super different, okay, from each other. So having that in count that I have already explained, I want to make my player jump when I release the mouse left, but globally. Basically, I don't want to jump only when the left mouse button is released, when I am clicking in the player. I want to be able to jump when the global left mouse is released in any position in the space, okay? Because remember that, for example, here left released would only be called if we release the left mouse button while we are like hovering the player, okay? So I don't want that. I want to be like in any place in the room in which I release the left mouse button, I want to jump. That's why I'm going to be using global left released. Now here in the description, as we are going to be coding the jump, here I will write jump. And to actually apply this jump, we are going to need a variable that will store our jump force. So here under variable definitions, I'm going to click here add. And by doing this, we are going to be creating a variable. So I'm going to call it jump force. I'm going to assign a value of 1000, for example. And then here the type is going to be an integer. Okay, here you can actually, you actually have here the explanations of what each type of value is. But well, here we're going to just be using an integer. I'm telling you this if you don't remember or you don't know some of them, you can quickly take a look at them. And once that I have that, what I want to do is to basically apply some kind of impulse up whenever this event happens, okay? So in order to do this, there is quite a handy function that here GameMaker provides, that is physics apply impulse, okay? And this will require us to provide some arguments. Basically, this is the X position and the Y position in where the impulse will take place. This will basically be my current X and Y position. And then we have to provide an impulse that is going to be applied in the X axis and an impulse that is going to be applied in the Y axis. As we want to apply a jump, usually jumps just modify the Y axis, because in a jump you just move up, you don't move horizontally, okay? For example, in any game you jump just up, but you don't jump directly, like, I know, to this in this direction. You always jump straight up. This means that in the X impulse we are not going to be impulsing. That's why I'm providing there a 0. And then here in the Y impulse I'm going to be writing minus jump force. And why minus? Okay, because jump force is a positive value, and to actually go up in GameMaker, you have to subtract. Let me explain this. So let's first of all, here in the instances, I'm going to select this layer, and now we'll drag and drop here my player. I will double click it, and let's take a look here at the Y. Okay, as you can see, I am in this position, but when I move it up, as you can see, it decreases. Okay, this means that if we want to apply an impulse that goes up, we have to apply it in a negative value so that we decrease the Y. Okay, as you can see. Whereas if you would want to apply an impulse to go down, you will have to actually add something to the value. It is like the other way around in which you would do it like in real life actually, okay? So it may be a little bit confusing. As we're using here a physics function, okay, we have to enable the physics in our object, okay? And basically this is as simple as basically enabling here this checkbox, okay? So basically this will allow us to use some physics functions, variables, etc. That, well, indeed are related to physical behaviors. Now when we play, what you will realize is that actually no physics are being applied. As you can see, if I try to click, well, I get an error. And basically here, I think that the error message may not be so clear. The instance does not have an associated physics representation, because what happens here is that the room by default doesn't have enabled the physics, okay, by default. So physics like don't exist, and as here we want to apply a function related to physics, it's not going to be possible since physics like don't exist in the room or aren't applied. That's why we are receiving that error. So we can go to the room game, and here as you can see we have here room physics. So let's basically enable here the physics, okay? And now when we try to play again, we do see that indeed we have there the physics, but well, we have some stuff that we have to fix. First of all, the gravity, like it is super weak. As you can see, it really takes a lot of time to attract the player to the bottom, and it also like and because of that the jump force seems that it is super strong, that if we click like 2-3 times, as you can see, the player will disappear. So indeed this gravity is super weak, so a value like 65 is going to work quite well. So now if we try it again, indeed now gravity and forces seem to work much better. You can experiment with different gravity and jump forces values. But well, our plane is like rotating all the time. So in order to fix that, let's go inside of our object player. And in the create event, I will delete here the description. Here we can call define fixed rotation. And we can change this to be true, okay? Basically, this will allow us to fix the rotation. So here it is quite explanatory. This variable can be used to set whether or not the instance can be affected by rotational forces. So indeed, actually this impulse, in spite of here not having like a way to disable the rotation that is being applied, here a rotation is being applied anyway, so we have to make sure that the rotation of our player is not being affected by this physics impulse that we are applying. So now as you can see, we do have our player movement finished, okay? So indeed this works quite well. Hello there and welcome to a new lesson. In this one, we will actually add some walls to the player. Because what happens is that even though like the player works quite well, as you can see, we can exit the screen basically on the top and on the bottom, and we want to avoid that because if not the player like would be able to exit the screen, and we don't want that probably. So let's go ahead and add some walls that will prevent us from leaving the screen. So in order to start with this, let's create a brand new sprite. Okay, that I'm going to be calling SPR wall. Okay, make sure that they are following the same pattern that you used in the previous sprites and objects. And well, here I will actually not render this wall. So actually the color, the sprite that we are going to be using doesn't really matter, but just so that we can see it in the editor, I will give it a color. So I will select here just a white color. And then here using the fill tool, I will fill this square in. So well, now we do have here this sprite wall. As we did before, we now need an object that will store this sprite. So let's go ahead and create it. This is going to be obj wall. And right here, let's drag and drop the corresponding sprite. In this case, we won't actually add any kinds of event to it or code. So you may be thinking, why are we actually creating an object for this? And this is basically because we want this object to be able to interact with the player, to basically stop the player from moving, from exiting the screen. And that is still a behavior that needs to be inside of an object, because a sprite would just be an image that doesn't do anything, that doesn't interact with the environment, that doesn't collide with the player, for example. So we actually need an object that is that objects are actually able to collide with others. So that is why we are actually creating a brand new object instead of just using a sprite. So now in our room game, we have to create these walls. So make sure that you are inside of the instances layer, and now we can drag and drop these ones. So I want to be able to hide these ones, okay? But first of all, let's actually make them a little bit bigger. So basically I can make this a little bit bigger like this, and it will work just well. And maybe I can move it to the outside of the screen. And then I'm going to be doing something quite similar, but right here. Okay, so let's drag and drop one wall over there. And then I'm going to make it a little bit bigger as I did before. And there we would have the walls. Now, when we play, as you can see, we are going to, basically, these walls aren't working. They aren't colliding with the player. And why, you may be thinking. Remember that our player has uses physics on, and our object wall doesn't have uses physics on. So we must make sure that if we want to detect collisions between objects, they both are using physics or they both aren't using physics, okay? So as here our player must use physics in order to create the jump, we also have to make sure that the wall is using physics as well. We may not actually apply gravity, other forces, etc., because actually we won't have any code throughout the course in this wall, but we still have to check here uses physics in order to collide with the player that does use physics, okay? Now when we run the game, what's going to happen is that the walls will fall down. As we have enabled physics, basically gravity is applied in the same way that gravity is being applied to our player, okay? So how do we disable the gravity for the wall? One solution that may come up to your mind is to go inside of the room game and here disabling the physics or decreasing the gravity. Why? But this would disable the gravity for all the room, okay? Because remember that this is a setting inside of the room game, so this would mean that the object player wouldn't have gravity and physics as well. So how do we disable gravity in just one object in the entire room? This is quite simple. Inside of the object wall, we have here the physics settings. Here we have lots of different settings that we won't actually be covering in this course, just one. And this is going to be density, okay? So if we actually change density to 0, what is going to happen is that gravity won't be applied to this object, because as it has this density 0, is that like it has no weight, okay? And if something doesn't have any weight, it means that it can be applied, that physics can't be applied, okay? So that is why we are changing here basically density to 0, because as it has no density, there is no force that can be applied to it. Because actually, if you check here your player, you would be able to see that in the physics, the density is set to the default value that is 0.5, And this would actually mean that the object exists. Let's say that it has some weight in it, and with this weight is then that the gravity is applied and that all the physics are being applied. Okay, so this is just for you to understand correctly how to interact with physics and how to disable gravity in certain objects. Okay, and basically with this we would have these sprites that would work quite well. Now, other thing that I want to clarify is the fact that if you want to hide them here, because I don't think that it looks well here in the edge to have like there are two pieces of blocks, what we can do is to double click on them, and then here in the color we could basically just decrease the alpha until 0, that the alpha is the transparency. So now when we click OK, you can see that the object is not synced. So if you actually want to modify or move it, if you can't find it over here, you can basically go to the instances, and here you can double click it and it will open up the menu, because maybe here now you don't remember where your wall was. And we can do the same thing but with the other wall. So let's decrease its alpha. And basically there we have it. Okay, so now the cool thing with this is that also we would be able to move this a little bit like more inside of the screen. It won't still be seen by the player, but well, we would even restrict the player movements a little bit more if you wanted to. And this is something that we will actually use once we create the health bar. Okay, but we will get in more detail when the time comes. So right now I will leave both of my walls a little bit like off the screen like this. Okay, one over here and the other one over there. So the results are going to be the exact same one, but well, we now have them like completely transparent. That will allow you to place it in any place of the screen that you want. Okay, if you really wish to do that. So now I will see you in our following lesson.